Welcome to Loup TV. I'm Gene along with Doug. It is Thursday, January 13th. Probably felt like Friday the 13th given what happened in the market today. We will lead with that. Also talk about the Apple Epic saga continues and bring back an old name with Second Life. This Lyndon, you may remember Second Life is back in the news. And no episode in at least January of 2022 of Loup TV is complete without mentioning something in the EV space related to Tesla. So we'll first start and talk about the market. The NASDAQ closed down 2.5% today. If you recall, on Monday, it was down 2.5% and then kind of rallied back. I think it finished up fractionally. We didn't get that rally. We got a fade today. There is not a ton to add beyond what we talked about yesterday, which is the idea of trying to guess what the Fed's doing. And we're just continuing to look for great companies. And from my perspective, and then I'll turn it over and get your perspective on this, Doug, I still want the event that happens when the Fed at least sends a kind of a clear message that they've got things under control. I feel like the market is operating on pins and needles right now, and we need something to kind of flush that mentality. What's your take?
I think a lot of it's a big psychology game right now. We were talking a little bit about this actually earlier today, but something we track is these kind of two standard deviation moves in the NASDAQ or the S&P 500. It's fairly uncommon when you see that kind of volatility in a daily move up or down. Usually it's about 2.5% is roughly two standard deviation move. We've actually had two of those types of moves this week. Monday, we were down 2.5% on the NASDAQ, and we actually came all the way back, which in itself is uncommon. And then today, obviously, we kind of faded down all day to 2.5%. And so seeing those kind of moves in such a compressed time space, I think is actually a window into just the psychology of the market. There's just fear out there. And I think the reason that the sort of compressed extreme volatility like that matters, and I think this is in somewhat a better index than like the VIX, for example, is that human psychology is this herd thing, particularly in the markets. And when people are scared, the market goes down. When the market goes down, people get more scared, and you sort of have this cascading effect. And eventually, something has to break where people sort of get washed out, the fear is washed out. And to me, when you see things like this happen, it just feels like we're not quite there yet. So maybe to your point, Gene, it takes some sort of a stronger statement from the Fed. Who knows? In the meantime, we'll offer our kind of common daily message, which is you just have to sort of look for value wherever you can find it and then get ready to embrace the pain on the way.
Love it. Speaking of a painful relationship that there has not been any embraces between these two companies, Apple and Epic. Just a little on the surface here today is that Epic is now working with Nvidia's GeForce, which is basically a gaming subscription. And Fortnite is going to be added into their GeForce gaming subscription, which, surprise, does operate on mobile Safari. And so there is a workaround here where eventually, it sounds like in the weeks to come here, that a limited number of people are going to be able to play Fortnite on their iPhone through the Nvidia GeForce. There's a lot of hoops you got to jump through. It clearly is not going to be a very elegant playing experience. It just kind of was a little bit of a head scratcher for me why Nvidia is even going through the pain of this just to try to poke a little bit at Apple, or what's going on here.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Epic certainly is going through it to poke at Apple and
Epic at Apple.
Yeah, Nvidia, but it's probably a good question for Nvidia too. I don't know, ultimately that this matters all that much for either side. To your point, it's complex to sign up for GeForce. Not a lot of people use game streaming services today, and you have to play it in the Safari browser, which isn't going to be a great experience right now. Who knows if that improves over time? I think the bigger question, though, is ultimately how Apple does deal with these gaming streaming services longer term, because we know that we've got one from Nvidia, we've got one from Google, which is Stadia. Other big gaming companies have talked about streaming services. It's a very important part of the evolution of gaming in general. And as those services come to devices like iOS, there are going to be questions of, how does this service get through the App Store? How then do games, which are being streamed, not downloaded, how does Apple think about those things running on their device? In some ways, games that probably in the past, like Fortnite, might have been made to be native and enabling Apple to monetize them through their payment mechanisms.
It reminds me a little bit about how services like Netflix have been a window into all this other content that we see on our computer screens or our displays, our Samsung and LG displays. All of that, there's kind of some similarities here with gaming as far as kind of being a conduit where you can use these gaming streaming services to get on different devices. But when I think about the content, the video content, that doesn't really require much interaction. It's just kind of get something up and running, and then you go to expand a full screen, and then you sit back and you enjoy. And the gaming side, it just feels like it's from a technology standpoint, it's going to be there's more friction to really enable compelling experiences simply through the browser. What's your view?
It is today. I would agree with that. I think over time, though, we're getting more creative with how we can use things like the old HTML5 we used to talk about, and grab input, essentially richer input from the user into the browser as part of that experience. And so, is it ever going to be as good as a native application? Maybe, maybe not. I think it'll take time to get there for sure. But I think it'll certainly be usable for a lot of players. No one should ever expect to use a game streaming service on your iPhone or your iPad and compete with people who are playing on a PC. But I don't think that's what people are doing when they're using their iOS device to do these services. So, for the
you're trying to kill time.
Right. Yeah. To kill a little time and have a little fun in Fortnite or wherever, a game that they really love and maybe can't access, I think it is potentially a viable new access point longer term for some of those games.
I agree with you that there's going to be more on the whole game streaming and how Apple navigates that with any policy changes. I don't expect any changes from Apple on their policy side related to this Fortnite workaround in the near term. I think they probably recognize that it's fractional at best and let sleeping dogs lie here. But as more of these game services come up, I think you could see more rules around the App Store, which is going to give Apple probably some greater control around that. All clear on that. Are you okay to move on to our Metaverse topic for the day?
Let's do it.
So for those of you who were born after 2003, you probably have never heard of Second Life. Second Life was, in fairness, is probably the original Metaverse. These were kind of immersive experiences, 2D at the time, where you'd have an avatar, you'd walk around, you'd go grocery shopping, you'd go to parties, you'd go to bars, you could become your alter ego. It was a pretty big deal for a very passionate base. In fact, it was so passionate at times, people were getting married in Second Life. It sounds like a joke. It was not a joke for the people that were involved. Some funny stories around that. But it was a concept that was well above its time and just kind of faded by 2010, 2011, had faded. The founder, Philip Rosedale, had left the company around that time, had some other ventures. But what brings our Second Life, the company was acquired probably for pennies on the dollar. My guess is $5 or $10 million, back a couple of years ago. But what brings it into the news today is their founder's coming back. And whenever you hear that, he was a visionary. It's kind of like bringing MySpace's founder back to MySpace. It caught our attention, and I would be curious what your take is. Is this a big deal having Philip back in the wheelhouse?
It's definitely newsworthy. I think anytime you have somebody who could be thought of as sort of an OG of that space, people will pay attention. I think the thing that's a challenge in my mind is, and I would probably disagree with the characterization of it being the initial metaverse. I think it certainly was, the original virtual world. And to me, a metaverse really requires a different level of economic viability, and in particular, sort of these widespread property ownership rights that transcend, one single world. I think that that's a really important part of a true metaverse. And so that's what I think the real challenge is going to be for Second Life, the new iteration of it, whatever it looks like, is how do you sort of re-envision either the current product or maybe even you start from scratch, but build a product that incorporates the blockchain, which is something that didn't even exist really in 2003. And how do you kind of bring in all of the things that we've learned from, crypto and in particular NFTs, mostly on the Ethereum blockchain, and how valuable that whole space has become and how important it's become for these other metaverse projects that will compete with Second Life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's Philips coming back to the same name, the same brand, but a very different landscape. And I kind of think about this as they've got a little bit of a brand that they can build off, but it's probably starting from scratch. Would you agree with that?
It feels like it. I don't know how many people still use Second Life right now. I'm sure there's still some diehard users, but I would imagine that you probably take what you can, try to port users over to some new service, and probably start from scratch.
We're going to wrap up in the EV space. Some Tesla news today that they are no longer having the Cybertruck has been removed for a potential 2022 delivery. It originally was scheduled for delivery at the end of 2021. They pushed it to late 2022 to 2023, kind of gave that we'd start to see some fractional volume in 2022. Sounds like that is not going to happen now. It sounds like it's going to be 2023. It doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of Tesla numbers because the 2022 shipments would have been fractional at best. I think it does kind of speak to them aligning probably where they can get the most momentum right now. I think it also speaks to the difficulty in production and ramping production. Elon talks about that being 100 times more difficult than building a car. Probably tells you a little bit about what Rivian and Lucid are going to be going through this year, trying to ramp their production when you see something like Tesla pushing back. And of course, we need to mention, we do have a wager here, Doug, related to Ford, which, by the way, hit $100 billion in market cap today. It was up today, 2.5% in a bad market. Ford, the F-150 Lightning outselling the Cybertruck. I believe you're going to get to market with your F-150 earlier than my Cybertruck. Is that the case now?
As long as Ford doesn't suffer from the same production problems, that should be true.
That's right. By the way, I'll take a bet that they do, and they push it to 2023. But
we'll see. The thing that's different to me between Rivian and Lucid, who you mentioned before, and I think that's probably the most important takeaway, is they're companies that have not gone through, I think, what Elon has lovingly referred to as production hell. And they need to figure that out. Ford has built more cars than almost any other car company on the planet in their history. So they know how to build a car. They're learning how to build an electric car. So there's probably risk maybe to their deliveries, but I feel like they're definitely in a better place just in terms of know-how and certainly the infrastructure they've built to deliver on time than some of the upstarts are.
I forget how many reservations you had on your 150 Lightning. It was like 300,000. They stopped taking it.
That's
of
right.
course, Tesla doesn't give those. I've seen numbers as low as 1.25 million estimated on their delivery, at least the backlog. As many as 3 million. I think the 3 is probably a stretch because most humans won't wait 2 years for something like that. I hope someday to be amongst those ranks. I did right after Elon broke the glass in November 2019. I just couldn't help but put my $100 down and put a reservation in. And a week.
All that matters is deliveries. We'll see. We'll see when they.
All that matters is deliveries, right? And we'll leave it at that. On behalf of Doug, Gene, and Loup TV, bye for now.